As a certified financial planner, I've helped many clients reach their financial goals, not the least of which is along the way is making sure they don't pay a dime more than they have to the federal government. Pay what you owe, but not a dime more.
Welcome to the Average Joe Finances Podcast. Are you trying to get out of debt, invest, or just not sure where to start? Then this is the place for you. We discuss different ways to get out of the rat race and build your wealth. Join us on this wild ride to financial freedom.
Hey, welcome back to the Average Joe Finances Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Cavaggioni, and today's guest is Christian Bishop. So Christian, I'm super excited to have you on the show with me. Thanks for joining me today.
Hey, Mike, thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, I'd like to start this off the same way I start every podcast episode and ask you the same question I ask everybody that comes on, because we want to know about you, who you are. So if you could share your story, how did you get started, and especially on your own personal finance and financial freedom journey.
Oh, no, that's great. Thank you. I started in the business, we'll say, the financial sector 25 years ago, which is hard to believe it's been that long, but it's been a great and wonderful journey. And I started in the business as a tax accountant. And I realized very quickly there are a lot of people out there who have no idea of what they're missing out on. And I made it my mission to help people in that regard. Later, I discovered that I also had a passion for investing in finance. So I earned my certified financial planner designation and incorporated that into my practice. And the last 25 years as an enrolled agent, which is authorized to practice before the Internal Revenue Service, and as a certified financial planner, I've helped many clients reach their financial goals, not the least of which is along the way is making sure they don't pay a dime more than they have to the federal government. Pay what you owe, but not a dime more.
I love that. I love that, because every time you sit here and you get, for the people that are listening, they get these big fat tax returns. They're like, oh, look at this huge tax return I just got. You just gave that money as an interest-free loan to the federal government. So not doing too much there. Now, there are other people who get themselves in a situation where they have to pay taxes every year. And I just reached that milestone myself and had to pay. And as I got more heavily involved in investing and making more money, this was something that I found that I'm not a big fan of. I'd like to get into that a little bit about, what you do, especially as an enrolled agent, to help people not pay more than a penny of what they owe to the federal government.
Absolutely. And here's the first thing. I want to congratulate you on having to pay taxes. And the reason being is that means you made money. And so while this seems counterintuitive to what I just said, but I really hope that you pay $1 million in income taxes next year because you made way more than that. But again, we don't want to pay more. And that's where a lot of what I do helps people because, we have to pay taxes if we make money. But let's make sure we're not paying any more than we have to. Make sure we find every deduction, every credit, arrange our affairs in such a way as to minimize taxes. And then when it is time to pay, there's some better ways to pay and some not so good ways to pay. And maybe we'll talk about that as we go along.
Actually, yeah, let's get into that because I've heard of there's different ways where you could have these payment plans and this pay over time if you don't want to just pay all this one lump sum. What would you say could that be a problem if somebody decides to make payments instead of just paying it all at once?
It can be, but it depends. If you're making the payments before they're due, meaning estimated quarterly payments, you might hear some people who are self-employed talk about, oh, I have to do my quarterlies. That's a broad term, but basically they're paying ahead of time and it helps them avoid penalties and interest for paying after the fact. But like a lot of successful people who are in business, the first year they discover they actually owe, they didn't plan on it. They had no idea. But they did really well with whatever it was that they were producing or making or consulting. Tax time rolls around and their accountant or their software tells them, hey, you owe $12,000. And they're like, oh my gosh, I already spent that money because I reinvested it in my business or whatever it was. So in that case, you are making payments, but those payments are going to include some interest. But if you do it right, you can avoid a lot of the penalties. And one of the most important things you can always do, file on time. If you have to file an extension, extensions are not extensions to pay. They're just to file. So you make an estimated payment. If you find yourself in that situation where you just don't have the money, the interest that the IRS charges in many cases is greater than what some credit cards charge. So while I hate saying this because I'm a financial planner too, sometimes I say pay the government, use that credit card if you have a good one and have a decent interest rate because it's going to be lower than what the feds charge you. But that's all part of the process. It's best to pay upfront and pay as you go using estimated quarterly payments.
Okay, fantastic. That's great to know. And one of the things I also do on the side, besides being in the Navy, I'm actually a real estate agent, and I'm going to be doing that full time once I retire. And I've found that all my counterparts, that's what they do. They pay quarterly, and they make sure that they stay on top of that stuff, so they're not at the end of the year trying to scramble and figure out how they're going to pay their taxes. That's definitely a great way to think of it. It's all about having your plan throughout the year. It's something that we talk about this podcast a lot. Just in planning in general, whether it's your finances, what type of investment plan you want to be in. There's so many different things that we plan for. Even our own day. You make your schedule, you plan out your day, you plan out your week. People time chunk and time block. But not a lot of people sit down and think about, I need to plan for my taxes for the year. They're more focused on the end game, the end goal, right? What kind of profits am I going to make this year? Those profits are going to get taxed. So that's definitely something you want to plan for as well. So is that something that you also help people do, come up with a good spending plan? And when I say spending plan, a spending plan for their taxes. You help people come up with a good plan to make sure that they're making their quarterly payments or anything like that?
Yeah, and yes. And one of the things that you just touched on made me think of something that's so important. If you're just starting out doing an activity, and whatever it is, consulting, real estate, mowing lawns, whatever, okay, any business, you've got to remember that the money you make, it's not all yours. Part of that is the federal government's. And a lot of entrepreneurs or the folks who are just starting a little side business don't even think they're an entrepreneur. They think that money's theirs and it isn't. Now, most of it is. After you pay everybody else, you get to keep the bigger chunk. But there is an amount there that is the government's. And that part should be set aside. And what you just touched on, I find a lot of folks don't plan that. In fact, I dealt with a young lady recently who is doing some consulting, social media marketing, things like that, and she's starting to make some money. She wasn't charging enough because she's thinking in her mind, that's her money. But she's forgetting about, and it'll vary for every person, but approximately 20 to 30% will be the government's money. So she needs to raise her rates. And I told her this, and she never even thought of that. So yes, that planning is important, making sure you set aside some of that money, but you actually have to price that in. Now, real estate and what you're doing, I realize that's a little different. When you're making money doing that business, is some pre-established norms of what you charge in fees, commissions, whatever. So you can only vary that somewhat. I realize that, but you've got to make sure you set aside a portion of that is the government's money. Now you'll get plenty of write-offs. And hopefully after discussion today, and maybe if you pick up my book, Hidden Cash Uncovered, you'll find lots of tips that can help you along the way. Because again, you don't want to pay more than you have to, but you've got to set aside some that's going to be for the government and plan out those quarterly payments, part of your budget, just like you make a mortgage payment. Quarterlies are only quarterly, but same idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The same way you would treat your typical monthly expenses, just, hey, for every 3 months, it's going to be this amount that you're going to put towards your taxes or you're going to chunk towards your taxes. And what I see a lot of people doing, what I like to do with my commissions as well, is take about 33% of it, so 1/3, and just put that to the side, just as a safe spot to do it. So yeah, that's absolutely fantastic and definitely appreciate that perspective. Now, and I'm sure you have clients from all different walks of life, from people that have the standard W-2 to people that have started off a small business, to other people who invest in real estate. So I'm pretty sure you've dealt with them as well. Now, I wanted to ask you, are there different ways or better ways to be advantageous when it comes to tax savings? What would you say is some of the more common things versus some of more of the uncommon things that you see people do to save on taxes?
Every industry has its own, we'll say, deductions associated with it. And then there's the deductions that help everybody. As a real estate person, one of the things that you will come up with often is marketing. You're going to spend a fair amount of money in marketing. Now, a lot of businesses do have marketing, but not all do. And you have to be, again, within the law, but creative. And examples of that in the real estate world is every time you're going to lunch or dinner with somebody, almost every time, if you're a realtor, you live and breathe real estate. You're talking about real estate. If it's a friend, a relative, or an actual client prospect. So those meals have a deduction. And so you want to keep track of that. You want to keep certain notes on it. There's rules around this stuff. But I noticed that a lot of realtors don't do that. They're so busy, they're not concentrating on that till tax time. And then they see their tax bill and they're like, oh my gosh. The other thing is vehicle use. Realtors put a ton of miles on their vehicles. And then they've got a choice. There's some mileage rate or actual expenses. Each person is individual. I don't really want to say which one is best because it depends, but that's something that they don't always keep track of. In audit, the first thing the IRS will ask for, okay, let me see your your mileage book. And then the realtor looks at him with a blank stare on the face saying, what? And that's just a known thing in our industry. You've got to keep some records because how do you know you went 22,000 miles? So realtors, just giving that as the example, some of the biggest things are vehicle use, marketing is huge. Then if they're real successful, they start hiring staff. These apply to other industries too. That's just scratching the surface. You have to think creative. The other thing is, and goes almost every industry, you're young yet, and a lot of your listeners are young and viewers are young, and some are a little bit more mature like myself. You got to think about retirement. And in that there's tax advantaged ways to put away some of your money. Now, everybody's different. Every situation is different. But self-employed people have more options than those who have W-2 wages. So they should be thinking about SEP IRAs, simple IRAs, solo 401ks, and the list goes on. If you're a W-2 wage earner, that scenario is usually limited to what your employer might offer you, a 401k, a simple IRA, et cetera. But the same idea applies. Also thinking about if you have children. In my book, I highlight one of the greatest things I think in the tax code that the IRS actually has in their manuals. They actually talk about this, is hiring your children. Now, you have to follow certain government laws about children in the industry of whatever it is you do. If you're in a hazardous industry, there's age requirements. A realtor might have a child work in their office doing cleaning and filing, et cetera, maybe make some phone calls. But hiring your children can be a huge tax savings if you're self-employed or have a business. Now, if you're a W-2 wage earner, probably not, right? Unless you own the company. So I think the list goes on, and we could spend about 12 hours and we'll just scratch the surface. But I get excited about this because those who do no planning and don't look for these opportunities will pay more in taxes, period.
Yeah, absolutely. And the government really likes those people. Actually, I'd like to touch on that a little bit because I've heard of this so many times where as a small business owner, you go and you open up an S Corp, right? And you hire your children to do certain tasks for your business and you can pay them up to $12,000 a year that you can have it as a tax-free write-off. Now, by doing that, now for me as a real estate agent, right, once I retire from the Navy and I go full-time into this, if I was to hire my children under my real estate license, like under my business, my doing business as under my name as a realtor, or do I need to open up an S Corp for that? Because I know there's a lot of different rules when it comes to being a realtor. Like I can't have my commissions going into a business entity. It has to come to me in my name. So how does something like that work?
Great question. And one caveat first. Every industry has different regulators that regulate them. So when I speak on these topics, you always want to make sure you're in compliance with your regulator. The tax code is actually more favorable to a single-owned LLC or individual, sometimes referred to as a sole proprietor. You actually end up with a better tax situation when hiring your children. This is just for this one strategy, when you're hiring your children, because when you hire somebody, you got to think about not just the income taxes, but Social Security and Medicare taxes, federal and state unemployment taxes. It all becomes part of the equation. It's more favorable to be an individual, like what you just described, or a single-owned LLC, whereas an S Corp absolutely can take advantage of this deduction, but some of the deductions don't apply, so it's not quite as lucrative, so to speak. In this case, you're better off as an individual. Now, as an individual, sole proprietor, you still have to file for a federal tax ID number. You would check with your state about workers' compensation. Most states, I shouldn't even say that, many states, because I can't say most because I haven't checked all of them, but many states will allow you to waive workers' comp when it's your own child and yourself. So that's something that you can look into. But essentially, if you're a sole proprietor, you can hire your child getting a federal tax ID number. There is some filing requirements. Hire a bookkeeper, or if you like, do it yourself. But you're actually better off as an S Corp. Great. You still get lots of good deductions. And I talk about this in my book because it's one of my favorite strategies. Lots of folks, chiropractors, dentists, construction workers, realtors, the list goes on, use this strategy. Now, it's a finite period of time. because guess what? Your
Right.
kids are going to grow up. So you got to follow your rules in your state and the industry again. But if you've got a 14 to 18-year-old, look into that strategy. Yes, you can do it younger. And obviously somebody older can still work for you. That still works. But the best ages are under 18, sole proprietors and single-owned LLCs.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That is awesome. And that's good to know, because my whole thing about this is I thought I need to open up an S Corp to do this. I didn't know I could do it. And I'll look up what the local rules and laws are for Hawaii, because like you said, every state's different. So you definitely need to know that stuff. And this is something that I've talked about several times on the podcast when it comes to just, even as a guest on another show the other day, I was talking about, the importance of like how when you're picking out your realtor that you're going to use and everything like that, you understand what the local rules and laws are in the area where you're investing or buying or purchasing any properties like that. So you have to know the local laws, at least to the best of your knowledge. Now, I want to talk a little bit about your book, right? Hidden Cash Uncovered. Just the name of it already like gets the goosebumps going, because, okay, so there's hidden cash, you help uncover it. So let's touch on that a little bit, because you said that this is one of the strategies you talk about in your book. What are some other strategies? Like, let's say you have somebody who is just starting their journey in financial freedom and they're working on paying down all their debt, and they're a W-2 earner and they want to start investing and they're not sure where to go, just at the point where they paid off all their debt and they want to get this party started. And from a tax standpoint, like this is a W-2 worker, which route would you recommend that somebody starts looking at for an investment vehicle that would be the most advantageous to save on taxes?
That last caveat, save on taxes, we can break that down into now or later. And the other part, and I'll touch on that, but the part that you mentioned about paying off the debt, that's huge. We could spend a whole show again talking about debt and how debt can be a tool. And like any tool, it can help you, but it's also can hurt you. But getting that debt paid, but making that assumption that it's paid. There's, through an employer plan, W-2 wage earner, you usually have available to you a 401k or similar plan. Many of those plans have two types of contributions you can make, pre-tax or after-tax. Pre-tax is where it saves you tax dollars today, grows tax deferred. When you retire someday, presumably in a lower tax bracket, you take money out at a lower tax rate. Great. The after-tax, sometimes referred to as a Roth 401k contribution, you do not save taxes today, but I'm going to touch back on that in a second. It grows, no tax owed, and as long as you meet certain requirements when you retire, it's tax-free. There is a huge debate, and you can pull in 20 financial advisors, certified financial planners, and enrolled agents like myself, and you'll get different opinions. But in my book, I highlight a situation where a young person who is modest mean benefited from doing a traditional 401k, meaning the pre-tax version and not the Roth. One of my counterparts in the industry said, oh my gosh, that's not the right way to go. She's young. She's in a low tax bracket. She should do the Roth. And I said, yeah, but by making the pre-tax contribution, there's a thing called the retirement savings contribution credit. When you're on the threshold of making too much money, you don't qualify for it. So if you make a Roth contribution and you're right on that cusp, you don't get that credit. You make a pre-tax contribution, it brings you down below that threshold. Now all of a sudden she qualified. And because she had children, it increased her earned income credit. So if you think about this for a moment, here's a W-2 wage earner, pretty much what you just described as somebody got the debt paid, getting going in life. At first, oh gosh, you should do a Roth. Not so fast. Do the analysis. In the end, it absolutely made sense, at least for the first few years, to do the pre-tax because it reduced her income, qualified her for that retirement savings contribution credit, and increased her earned income credit, which is refundable, meaning she got money back she never even paid in. You can't just make a blanket assumption. And that's something I think is really important. And that's the kind of coming back around. Just because somebody says in general terms, you should do a Roth or you should do a pre-tax IRA, doesn't mean it applies to you. You've got to look at your own situation.
We'll get back to the show after a brief break.
What if I told you that you could be debt-free in 5 to 7 years? Hey, it's Mike Cavaggioni with the Average Joe Finances Podcast, and I partnered with the Shred Method to help you pay off your mortgage fast. I personally used this method and was able to invest in 2 large multifamily apartment deals, pay off almost $30,000 in home renovation debt, and pay down a large chunk of my mortgage all within 3 months. I am confident in the Shred Method because it works. Did you know that you can eliminate your mortgage with the power of a simple tool called a HELOC? You can learn more about all of this at theshredmethod.com/Average Joe Finances. And if you use that link, you're going to save $200 off of your initial cost. Again, this is something that I know works because I use it myself. And that's www.theshredmethod.com/Average Joe Finances. Or just click that link below. Real estate investors know they're leaving money on the table every time they pass a rundown property and do nothing about it. Deal Machine lets you and your team pin distressed properties, look up the property owner on the spot, and send a personalized postcard to the owner directly from the app, all within a few seconds. You can set up mail on repeat to make sure you won't forget to follow up, and while the app is sending a custom postcard, you can look up the owner's phone number and email instantly. Plus, if you want to find even more off-market deals, you can build a team of people to drive for you. You just get to track how many properties your deal finders add every day, making your deal finding a scalable and profitable process. Go to DealMachine.com and use the code AverageJoe, that's AVGJOE, for 15 marketing credits during your free trial. That's AverageJoe, AVGJOE. Let's get back to today's episode. That's a great point, and that's a great story because it reminds me of something that I did very similar. Being in the military, we have the thrift savings plan. I'm sure you know what that is. And the thrift savings plan, they came out with a Roth version too, and that was maybe back in 2013. So I'm already enrolled in the standard, so that's what it was. And then when Roth came out, I completely switched over. Well, fast forward a couple of years, and I'm making more money while I'm in the military, and I got to the point where I was just peeking over into that next tax bracket. So after I took this class, I took this finance class talking about the thrift savings plan and how I was putting so much into the Roth versus the traditional. This guy helped me identify that if I was to take some of what I'm putting into the Roth and put it into the traditional, it's actually going to lower my income for the year. And if I just do that for maybe $3,000, I'm going to get lowered back down to that lower tax bracket and save a lot more money. There are certain situations, and I know the standard that you hear people talk about all the time is, hey, do the Roth. You don't know what the taxes are what the tax brackets are going to look like in the future. Hey, totally understand that. But there are some ways where you can actually have some significant savings today and maybe still contribute those savings to your Roth while still putting a nice chunk of change into a traditional at the same time. So I looked at that. I took that as an opportunity. So I took the money that I saved from not having to pay that in taxes and invested that elsewhere. I appreciate that perspective because I don't think a lot of people talk about that. A lot of people don't talk about what you can do to take a standard IRA or 401k and use that to your advantage to lower your income for the year. That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on an important part there too. Most plans allow you to split it. So assuming eligibility requirements are met and all the usual stuff, the fact is you can do both. And so even someone like myself, I see the value in a Roth for myself even, but I also need those tax deductions now for what you exactly described. So most goes in pre-tax, but I like to put a little bit, hedge my bets into the Roth as well. So why not do both if you can?
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So Christian, definitely appreciate that perspective. And again, that's something you don't hear too much about. So now I want to talk a little bit about, so you started off working as a tax accountant, right? And then you went and got your CFP designation, and then later became an enrolled agent. As you're doing this, you're getting to touch on so many different sides or pieces of the puzzle for someone that's looking not only to save on their taxes, but build a good financial plan to get themselves to a point where they can retire at an age where they feel comfortable. So as you're doing this, I just have to ask you, what is it that you enjoy most about being part of this industry?
It's helping people realize their dreams. And I have been doing it long enough that some of my clients that I started working with 25 years ago, we were starting with college savings plans. And there's some tax benefits, of course, to that. And we could talk about that. But as the kids grew up, they went to college, they graduated, they've all gotten married, they've had kids and I'm helping them set up their retirement plans, but also the college funds for the next generation. Seeing that and knowing that I can help people, sometimes it's small changes. Sometimes it's bigger, but just making sure that, again, they don't pay more than they have to the government, maximize the money that they're making, but helping them realize their dreams. It's one of the most rewarding things I've ever done in my life. And I feel like as an educator really is my passion. And I've done well with it over the years. And building that relationship with those clients, generational speaking, is just an amazing thing. And I'm so blessed to be able to do it.
That's fantastic. I figured, Christian, that was where you were going to be at with this, because I can tell just how genuine you are as you're doing this, as you're trying to help other people and get them to the point where they can live a comfortable life, retire comfortably. And then, as you said, that built that generational wealth. And now moving on to the next generation, you're getting to see that other side of it. So you're getting to see the fruits that have been borne by the seeds that you planted. So that is so cool. So that's awesome, man. All right. Yeah, of course. You're welcome. Now, Christian, for you yourself personally, so you're doing this, you're helping so many other people, but you have your own financial journey that you're on too. So what kind of asset classes do you currently invest in?
Right now, I think in the news, there's a lot of talk about markets are down and folks are concerned about where things are going and what they should invest in. When I first started in this industry, it was in the, giving away my age, in the late 90s. And I lived through the 2000, 2001, and 2002, 3 negative years
Y2K.
in a row. Y2K. Oh my gosh, somebody remembers that. What a bust. But after that, sadly, there was 9/11, and then there was the big, huge recession caused by 9/11 in part. So seeing that, I see that there's opportunity when things look their darkest. And to quote Warren Buffett, or not exactly, but summarizing what he says, when people are fearful, he's greedy, meaning he's looking for the opportunity. When people are running and they're selling and things are down, it's the time, or a good time, to buy. When everybody is greedy and they're doing things maybe they shouldn't, that's when he's fearful. So I look for the opportunity. Now, I have my safe money in the sense that I've always make sure you have a great emergency fund. I have a fairly heavy equity exposure because I live and breathe stocks. I even have some bonds. There's certain advantages to those. I'm not really someone who loves the new age of cryptocurrencies. That's not my world. I'm not saying there isn't opportunity there. I love real estate. They don't create more of it. Actually, in Hawaii, I guess you guys do now and then with a volcano, maybe filling in a little more ocean. But
Yeah.
For the most part, real estate is finite. And so I love having some real estate. And you can hold that in many ways. You hold it actual real estate. You can hold it through certain investments, exchange traded funds and or mutual funds, or other ways through REITs, et cetera. But I like real estate as an asset class. But one thing I think is really important, I don't put all my eggs in one basket. And
Right.
I'm going to pick on real estate agents for a moment. They are my toughest clients. Oh my goodness. Try to get a real estate agent to invest in anything other than real estate is so hard. And I'm not putting all of them down. You mentioned you had a thrift savings plan, so good for you. But a lot of them, because they live and breathe it, they'll put everything into real estate. Real estate is like any other investment. It has peaks and valleys, opportunities, and there's times where there's better opportunities. But if you get in a position where everything is in real estate, and it goes into a period where the market is not liquid, you can't eat your real estate. You need to have some other asset classes. I feel like diversification, that old adage, don't put all your eggs in one basket, is so important. So for me, it's always been that way. And while I don't always hit things right and I make mistakes like anybody else, the fact is I minimize financial ruin by not having everything in one asset class.
Yeah, absolutely. My portfolio is mostly real estate. So but you know what's surprising to me is how many real estate agents out there actually don't even invest in real estate or just don't invest at all. So there's quite a few out there. And it's really hard, at least for me, when I'm talking with other investors and they're like, yeah, I'm trying to invest in a couple things and I'm looking at these different properties, but the agent doesn't really know what's going on because that agent doesn't invest. So I always tell other people, like, if you're going to invest in real estate and as an asset class and you're looking for rental properties, talk to a real estate agent that also invests as well. But like you said, too, don't put all your eggs in one basket. I have some equities. I have some stuff in the stock market, mostly blue chip and index funds is what I really like. I have an account for my kids that's tied in the S&P 500. And I do have some crypto, not a lot because I don't know too much about it, but I do have a little bit. And it's just, And it's actually stuff that I even put my own money into. That there's this site I have my podcast on called Oriole. And on that website, like people can vote for your show and everything. And they vote your show up by paying crypto into it. And there's like this one coin, it's worth like $1.17 or something right now. And I've got hundreds of these coins that I've never even touched. And they're just sitting in this wallet just because it's just there. And it's something that I even have to put into. The only crypto I think that I've ever bought myself in the past was Bitcoin and Ethereum, the major players, but I don't know enough about it to mess around too much with that stuff. Sometimes you do have to step outside of your comfort zone, but at the same time, when it comes to your money, you want to make sure you understand the assets you're putting it into, not something you're just like, oh, I'm going to roll the dice, because then that's just gambling at that point. Right. So you want to educate yourself. Go talk to someone like Christian here and find out what's a good plan for you based on your income, based on your own strategies. So I think that's super important that everybody has their own plan, right? Don't just go into it willy-nilly without a plan, because typically that's when you fail. And sometimes people need failure. I've failed several times when it comes to investing and other things in life. And that failure is what actually opened my eyes to, okay, I got to do things differently here. Having a good plan and having a good financial planner, advisor, coach, whatever you use, don't try to do it alone. You don't have to do it alone. Nobody's ever alone in this. There's always some awesome people in the community that are willing to help you and take you to that next level. Definitely appreciate that perspective, Christian. Again, I find myself saying this often. That's awesome.
No, it's good. And I wasn't just picking on realtors. They aren't actually my toughest clients. I think back now after I said that, it's the folks who come to me and I find out that when I first talk to them that their retirement plan is playing the lottery. And I'm like, okay, now we have a lot more work to do. So realtors, way easier than that.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Growing up on Long Island, New York, I saw that a lot with just even my own family and friends and stuff. Like everybody's, oh yeah, I buy this many lottery tickets a week. And this is, once I hit it, then that's it. I'm like, you realize that the $5 ticket that you buy like every day, every week, that if you invested that, what that would be right now, like absolutely. Over a 20-year period, you would have hit the lottery, right? Yeah. By just investing in yourselves. Yeah. Oh man. Okay. Hey, so Christian, I'd like to transition this into something I call the final round, where I'm going to hit you with 4 questions that I like to ask everybody that comes on the show. So if you're ready, we'll get this party started.
All right. I'm looking forward to it. Let's go.
All right, Christian, here we go. So the first question is, what's the biggest mistake you've ever made?
In financial matters, it's not buying Amazon at $2.28. But from a personal perspective is trying to figure out what I want to do in life and waiting too long to do it. I feel it's hard when you're 18 years old and they say, okay, you're going to go off to college. What do you want to do? And that's so unfair. But I feel like I should have gone with my passion. And for me, my passion was finance, but I was thinking about dollars and cents. So I started in actual microelectronics was where I was going down. Realized that wasn't for me. So I should have followed my passion. So biggest mistake, financial, not buying Amazon at $2 and change. And then on the other end, not following my passion when I was deciding what to do.
Yeah, everybody has one of those like FOMO things where, for me, I had this stock that I bought a couple years ago. It was called Plug Power. I bought it at $2 and change, and I dropped about, I think it was $4,000 into it. So I had whatever, it doubled. So I was like, because they had an acquisition of 3 other companies, like 3 other power companies, and the price doubled. It was crushing it. And I'm like, okay, cool. I doubled my money. I'm pulling it out. Instead of pulling out what I put into it and leaving the rest in like I should have. Fast forward 3 months later, it got up to $68 a share. And that $4,000 I would have put in would have been over $500,000. Yeah. So things like that happen. And it's okay because I still made a profit. So it's okay. I try not to look at that too much, but I like to share that because it happens. And sometimes it really stings, but it's okay. Because as long as you know how to move on and keep going, you're going to be all right and you're going to be successful. Okay, Christian, the next question I have for you is, especially with your 25 years of experience in this field, is what is something that you've learned over this time that you wish you knew when you first got started?
People are people. And early on, I don't have that life experience to really know how to work with people. And it seems in this day and age, there's a lot of acrimony and there's like sides to everything. And I've learned that through life, I think there's a lot more in common with people if you just talk to them and listen to what they have to say. And early on in my career, I talked too much and didn't listen enough. And now I listen a lot more, hear what they're saying, find out what their real concerns are, and then maybe address those, what I can do in the financial world. So it's really about, in my case, is listening a lot more and not talking as much.
No, that's great. Actually, it's a saying that, and I tell my kids this all the time. We're given 2 ears and 1 mouth so we can listen twice as much as we speak.
Good one.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's a great lesson learned. That is a fantastic lesson learned. And it just goes to show that being able to listen and learn and get educated is one of the most valuable tools that we have as we move forward on our own journeys and trying to build wealth and generational wealth for our families is learn from the mistakes of others. Of course, learn from your own mistakes, but learn from the mistakes of others and then learn from the people that are successful. All right, awesome. Now, okay, again, so this all kind of ties into the next question. It all culminates to this because, again, with your experience and with how many people that you've helped over the years, I'm sure you take on new clients, right? You have new people coming to you all the time. So do you have any tips or tricks that you would recommend to someone that is just getting started today?
Yeah, and actually, I think you touched on it earlier. Debt is the biggest detriment to most of the folks who are just getting going in their financial journey, in my opinion. Some people are blessed and not to and arrange their affairs. They don't have it, but so many do, either from education or maybe they started a business, whatever it was. And that debt, it's not just the interest that you pay, it's the cash flow, and that negative cash flow going out for something that you've already done or had can eat away at your ability to do other things. So that has to become the number one goal, is to eliminate debt. Now, not all debt is bad, and we could talk about that in another show, but I think everybody who's listening and watching understand what I'm talking about. It's that credit card debt, the student loan debt, buying cars that maybe, you qualified for, but you really shouldn't own. It goes on and on. Real estate is a great place where debt can be a positive, but even that needs to be leveraged appropriately. Debt, get rid of debt, reduce your debt, lower your debt, whatever you've got to do so that the rest of your life, you're not trapped in that cycle of always paying.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that because a lot of people don't realize debt can be used as a tool and an asset. I do that in real estate. I utilize a lot of debt as a tool, but at the same time, like before I got started and I had a lot of consumer debt, the credit cards, the personal loans and all of that. And that was like the first thing I had to tackle before I was able to really get serious about what I was doing with my finances. And I find that most people that you talk to, probably 60% of Americans are in that boat where they are stuck in this cycle, making these minimum payments and never being able to pay off their credit cards because the interest rates are 22%. And it is a vicious cycle. So that is super important. That's a great tip to recommend to somebody who's just getting started is you got to get rid of that bad debt that's holding you back. Because once you do that, the money that you've been throwing into that monthly, man, there's so many things you can do with that at this point. Fantastic. All right, great. So look, I know you have a book. And so I want to just preface this with, besides your own, do you have a favorite business, investing, or real estate related book or podcast or both?
This is going to be one that I doubt many of you have heard or seen. It came out several years ago, but I feel like for a lot of your listeners and viewers that are just starting this journey, it really would make a big difference for them. It's called The Great American Mismatch. It's by Jim Delamater. You can find it on Amazon and other retailers online. And what it is, it talks about in a very short read, it is a very short book, is all the different professionals that you're going to work with at some point in your life, or many of them, including financial advisors and bankers, et cetera. And it gives the reader the downside of some of these industries and those folks in it. It's mostly a negative kind of point of view, but there is the positive side. And it's what to watch out for. What are people trying to get from you? When they're trying to get you to buy a product or a service, what is it in their interest? And are they putting your interests first, or is it their interest first? Bankers, insurance, investment professionals, accountants, et cetera. It talks about many of them. And I find for somebody who's just getting going, read this thing. It'll take you a couple hours, bring it on a plane, whatever. I feel it's probably one of the most important short books that somebody could read and get the most information out so that they can be more aware of how they're probably being taken advantage of at some point in their life. Now, some people never are, and they're really good at this, but I have all my children read it. And just when you're going out to the world, Now you know what to watch out for.
That's fantastic. That's a great recommendation. I had to write that one down just because of the way you're describing this book. That's wonderful because a lot of people do. And I just want to point this out a little bit too, especially after 20 years in the Navy. One of the things that I've seen is I've seen it myself when I first joined, and I see it now with young sailors that are joining now. And this goes for all service members or anybody just getting out into the world for the first time. They graduated high school, maybe they're getting a job or maybe they're going to college. And when you get out into the world, mom and dad ain't there to hold your hand anymore. So you show up to your first career. Like I said, a lot of service members run into this, and now they have a job, they're getting paid, they have a place that they're living now outside of their home, they need a car, so they go to a car dealership, and a lot of places like where they might be stationed at might not have these laws that protect them. You can go turn around and say, oh yeah, we can get you approved for this car. We can make your payments $300 or less a month. You're going to pay on it for 8 years, and the interest rate's going to be 30%, but hey, yeah, we got you. And those are the type of places you want to avoid. You want to try to stay away from that. And you want to listen to a podcast like this that will steer you away from stuff like that. So that's the whole point of doing stuff like this. That's a great book for people just getting started out to definitely check out. That might be one of the new ones that I recommend as a foundational book to check out. So I'm definitely going to check this one out because it sounds like it's got some great nuggets of wisdom in there.
Absolutely does.
Yeah, Christian, thank you so much for that. And this conversation's been absolutely awesome. I feel like awesome is the word that I've used so much on this episode because this has just been some great information. And for the people that are listening to this right now that agree with me that this interview has been awesome and they want to know more about you because they like what you're putting out, they like the information that you're sharing with all of us, and they're going to want to know where they could find you. So do you have anywhere that we can send them, a website, any social media, anything like that where people can come check you out?
Yeah, and I'm on all the various social media outlets, but they can go to Hidden Cash Uncovered. And on my website has links to where they can find the book, more about me, some information, hiddencashuncovered.com. Start there, it's easy. Or they can just look my name up and they'll find me around in the various places as well. So thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. So guys, hey, I'm going to make sure I have all those links in the show notes, make it easier for you to find. Go check out his book because just with the wave tops that we've touched here, you can see obviously that book is going to provide you a lot of golden nuggets of how to uncover that cash that's been hidden and how to try to get some of that back and not overpay the government because, hey, they do make enough off of us as it is. So as long as you're not being one of the people that are overpaying and losing out, making sure you're putting more in your pocket to save for your future instead of everyone else's, right? You got to focus on yourself a little bit. And this is one of the points where, hey, I'm not saying that paying taxes is a bad thing. Paying taxes is a patriotic thing to do, right? Because the nation needs money. You don't want to overpay. Just like you don't want to go to Starbucks and pay $8 for already an overpriced cup of coffee that's $4 and change, right? So you don't want to pay more than you have to. I think that's the biggest point here. So Christian, again, this was a fantastic conversation. It was a pleasure speaking with you today, and I truly appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today. Thanks so much.
Mike, thank you. I really appreciate being on your show. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And aloha from Hawaii.
All right.
Thank you for making it to the end of this episode. Greatly appreciate you being here with me today on the Average Joe Finances Podcast. If you haven't done so yet, make this the episode that you go leave us a 5-star rating or subscribe to our YouTube channel. The Average Joe Finances Podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Have an outstanding day.
Thanks for listening to the Average Joe Finances Podcast, your source for beating debt, saving money, and investing. Learn more at averagejoefinances.com.